President Grimson in absentia, thank you for your kind invitation, and congratulations on the Arctic Circle, which has become a shining example of inclusion. Distinguished colleagues and friends, looking at the Earth with a sense of shared responsibility, nearly 30% of our planet's surface falls within the boundaries of nations, representing diverse national interests. Conversely, the other 70% of the Earth's surface exists beyond sovereign jurisdictions, in international spaces that humankind has established in terms of common interests. For our civilization, the challenge we collectively face is to balance national interests and common interests. The Arctic Ocean reflects this challenge, and the lessons learned there from actions of stakeholders represented in this room will resonate long after into the future on a global scale. The first international space to be established was the high seas in 1958, followed by Antarctica in 1959, outer space in 1967, and the deep sea in 1971. Global cooperation and vision to create these international spaces during the second half of the 20th century is in stark contrast to the animosity that our world experienced during the preceding decades. In effect, it was the 20th century when we truly became a globally interconnected civilization, illustrating our challenge forever after to balance national interests and common interests. Briefly, along with West Greenland and the Bering Strait region, the high seas is a focus area of the Arctic Options Project that is jointly funded by the United States and France from 2013 to 2016. The mission of Arctic Options is to identify sustainable development and policy options that balance economic, social, and environmental interests in Arctic coastal marine systems through an international, interdisciplinary, and inclusive process of data analysis. In contrast to recommendations that involve advocacy and agendas which often are seen as intrusive by policy systems, options can be introduced without promotion where they are used or ignored, but with the clear objective of contributing to informed decision-making. In 2008, by virtue of their sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in large areas of the Arctic Ocean, the 5 Arctic coastal states noted that they remain committed to the law of the sea as an extensive international legal framework that applies to the Arctic Ocean. This Ilulissat Declaration opens the door for options to be considered for the high seas of the Arctic Ocean. Starting with the 1958 Convention on the High Seas, it was established that the high seas are open to all nations and that no state may validly purport to subject any part of them to its sovereignty. Building on the 1958 conventions, the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea reconciled the legal zones of our world ocean. On the sea floor, progressing from the coastal baselines, there is continental shelf, where states have sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdictions. Beyond the continental shelves is the international space of the deep sea. In the overlying water column, again progressing from the coastal baselines, states have jurisdictions through their territorial seas and contiguous zones out 200 miles to the edge of their exclusive economic zones. Beyond the exclusive economic zones is the international space of the high seas. Unifying these zones, the law of the sea reflects a jurisdictional continuum from the nation-state to the international space on both the seafloor and in the overlying water column. Similarly, the law of the sea reflects a continuum of cooperation from national interest to common interests. For the Arctic Ocean, recognizing that there are questions about the limits of continental shelves, it is conceivable that seafloor all the way to the North Pole might be defined in terms of national interests. Nonetheless, independent of any decisions about the continental shelves, as a distinct legal zone in the overlying water column, the high seas of the Arctic Ocean will remain unambiguously beyond sovereign jurisdictions. With vast areas of the Arctic Ocean becoming ice-free during the summer, concerns have emerged that fishing in areas of the high seas would, by definition, be unregulated in areas without a regional fisheries management organization, which only exists in the Northeast Atlantic sector. Consequently, again with stewardship, the 5 Arctic coastal states agreed in February 2014 on the desirability of developing appropriate interim measures to deter unregulated fishing in the future in the high seas area of the central Arctic Ocean. This Nuuk Declaration opens the door for the international community to collectively address sustainability of the high seas. Immediately afterward, in March 2014, the Convention on Biologic Diversity convened a workshop with the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission and the Convention for the Protection of the Marine Environment of the Northeast Atlantic to consider potential ecologically or biologically sensitive marine areas in the high seas of the Arctic Ocean. Also in March 2014, the European Parliament introduced a joint motion for a resolution that would include area protection as well as precautionary measures in the high seas. Such policy developments for the Arctic high seas recognize the potential for multiple uses in this international space, and again, Larry's slide, which are further revealed by actual and projected shipping activities around the North Pole. The Arctic seafloor and proposed outer continental shelves represent the coastal states looking seaward toward the North Pole from the perspective of their national interests. In contrast, the high seas involves the entire international community with rights and responsibility in an inclusive manner, looking coastward from the North Pole in view of their common interests. This juxtaposition of the Arctic coastal states and the international community in the Arctic Ocean reflects the challenge we face as a civilization to balance national interests and common interests, promoting cooperation and preventing conflict. Such balance is necessary to ensure that the Arctic Ocean remains a region of low tension, which is the precursor for any and all sustainable development opportunities. The next step requires statesmanship and the political will of heads of state to ensure that the Arctic Ocean remains a region of low tension. As an option, during the upcoming United States chairmanship of the Arctic Council, President Obama has the opportunity to convene a meeting among all Arctic heads of state to establish the Arctic Ocean as a region of stability and peace in the lasting interests of all. Thank you.